show is about to begin. Before it does, if you're one of those, I love Pink Floyd, but I can't stand Roger's politics, people, you might do well to off to the bar right now. Thank you.
And if you are one of those who can't stand Roger Waters' politics, now might indeed be a good time to go grab a drink, because the founding member of the iconic band Pink Floyd and one of the world's most outspoken musicians joins me now for a conversation about activism, Israel's war on Gaza, rock and resistance. Good to have you with us, Roger.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
We just saw there that spectacular opening of your latest This Is Not a Drill tour. Quite a statement. What's behind that message telling people to bugger off to the bar if they don't like your politics?
It was a piece of theatre, and it was a very effective piece of theatre because obviously it's humorous, it's tongue-in-cheek. I'm not actually seriously telling people to F off to the bar. And so it's a very good way to open the show, and particularly towards the end of the tour, the latter shows where everybody knew that spoken message was coming. And so they're ready for it, enjoy it, because they enjoy telling the opposition to F off along with me.
We appreciate you censoring the F word there. It was a fair warning, though, because there's quite a lot of politics in your show. Your political statements there splashed on those gigantic screens. And obviously, towards the end of the tour, Israel's war on Gaza started, and all that messaging gained a whole new and more urgent meaning, perhaps. Can you tell us about that?
Well, Israel's war on Gaza didn't start after the tour. Israel's war on Gaza started in the middle of the 19th century. Well, not... Yes, Israel's war. The Zionist war on the indigenous people of Palestine started in the middle of the 19th century. And it came to one of its primary heads on the 10th of May in 1948 when the Nakba started. And that's 75 years ago. So nothing actually started towards the end of my tour. And we all know all of that. And this morning, particularly now that they're invading Rafah and they're bombarding the place in southern Gaza that they told the Palestinians to go to because it was a safe area. What we're seeing now beggars belief in every way. It's obviously unconscionable. And every morning we all wake up flabbergasted and disgusted by the Zionist entity that is committing this genocide. None of us, including you, are quite sure what to do because the scale, the enormity of the crime that Israel is committing is so great that it's hard for us to wrap our minds around it and to figure out how to respond to it.
You're absolutely right. None of us actually knows what to do. You have been an outspoken voice for Palestine for years now. How did you come to know about this? What opened your eyes to the injustices endured by Palestinians?
Well, I'm ashamed to say that I didn't become part of the movement until 2006, when my agent booked a gig in Tel Aviv in the middle of a European tour that I was doing. I think it was the Dark Side of the Moon tour, but I'm not sure. And I immediately started to get email messages from everywhere, but particularly from North Africa and the Middle East. And one of them was from Omar Barghouti, who I'm sure you've heard of, who was one of the prime movers in Palestinian civil society, starting the BDS, Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, which is simply a non-violent human rights movement to try and budge the Zionist entity from its policies of occupation and what has now turned into overt, open-air genocide.
You're obviously right about this war not having started on October 7th, but we're definitely seeing much more pushback now for people like you who advocate for Palestinians. An organization in the UK even produced a documentary on Rogers' activism. Take a look.
I'm John Ware, working with the charity Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, and I'm going to examine the evidence for the charge that Roger Waters is an anti-Semite. I talked to people who've worked closely with him and who are speaking publicly for the first time.
He does things and says things that Jewish people take as an attack against us as a group.
This dish comes and Roger kind of pushes it with his arm and he goes, "That's it, this is Jew food, what's with the Jew food?"
I mean, we're not trying to validate those points. I actually want to get your reaction. I mean, this seems to be an old strategy, isn't it? To kind of, I don't know, link whoever criticizes Israel's government to some kind of behavior anti-Jews.
Sorry, I interrupted you. John Ware, the supposed journalist who you saw at the beginning of that clip, is a well-known, lying, conniving Zionist mouthpiece. I have nothing but utter contempt for him. I sat through the whole of that quote documentary, and it's a complete joke. It's made by something called the Campaign About Anti-Semitism. Well, the anti-Semitism argument is now blown out of the water. The genocide going on in Gaza now has absolutely proved beyond all doubt that those of us who've been standing up for Palestinian rights for the last 20 years are not only not anti-Semitic, that our motivations are not against the Jewish religion or the Jewish people. We are motivated by the crew of thugs who are running the Zionist entity in Israel, who are all Northern Europeans. They had nothing to do with the Holy Land. And they're trying to use the Jewish people and the Jewish religion, which I admire, both of those groups, Jewish people and the Jewish religion, which is a humane religion, they don't care about. The difference between me and John Ware and the difference between all of us on our side of the argument and all of the pro-Zionist, pro-genociders is that we believe in the Paris 1948 Declaration of Human Rights. We believe that all our brothers and sisters all over the world should be equal under universal law.
I imagine that sitting through that documentary was quite an unpleasant situation for you, but obviously there's much more concrete backlash than this. A member of our online community on social media has a question for Roger about the risks of speaking up for Palestine. Let's take a look.
Hey Roger, this is Khaled from Jordan. What advice do you give people who dare to say something against the crimes and oppression that Israel is committing, but then only get attacked, threatened, and eventually silenced?
What advice do you have, Roger?
My father died in Italy on February the 18th, 1944, fighting the Nazis. My mother, who survived him, took me aside one day when I was 13 years old. And I've told this story before, but it bears retelling. And she could see that I was trying to think something out. I've no idea what it was. But she said to me, Roger, sit down. I'm going to give you some advice. All through your life, you are going to be faced with difficult problems that you're going to have to think about. My advice when you are faced with something different, this would be a good time for people to start doing what mother suggests. Read everything that you can find about it. If it's geographical or political in any way, read the history. So read the history, okay? Don't listen when people say October the 7th. Read all the history. My mother said to me, when you've done that, read some more. And then she said, when you've done that, you've done all the heavy lifting. The hard work is over. The next bit is easy. Oh, really, Mum? What is the next bit then? You do the right thing. What a wonderful piece of advice to anybody. And my answer to the young man who was asking the question is, we have no alternative, my friend. We have to stand up and we have to do the right thing. And we are. And there are billions of us all over the world. We are a majority. Things have changed in the last 10, 15 years. And you can see it when... Sorry, go on.
Sorry to interrupt. Precisely on that point, throughout the past few months, we've seen millions of people who share this view, who share this sentiment, attempt to, for example, take to the streets to express their views in places like the US or the UK or France, and places where the governments have instead stood by Israel. Does that make you, I don't know, question our democratic systems here? Do you still have faith in Western democracies these days?
Now, of course I don't. I haven't had faith in Western democracy since shortly after the Second World War. Anybody who has faith in Western democracy is obviously a bit thick. They haven't been watching what's going on. Well, now is the time, because the Western democracies have come out openly. Not just Joe Biden and Antony Blinken and Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan and the Americans, but also Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, the turncoat leader of the Labour Party in England, and Macron and all the leaders of the so-called democratic countries all over NATO have all come out and said, here we are, we declare that we don't give a fig for you or for democracy or for human rights. All we care about is our narrow economic and hegemonic and political interests. And this is us demonstrating it to you. And if you elect any of us again, ever, so be it.
You'll get more of that. Roger, on that precise point, the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak took it a step further recently. He had this message for pro-Palestinian protesters. Take a listen.
Since the October 7th attacks in Israel, we've seen protests across our country almost every weekend. Many of these have been respectful, but there have also been far too many appalling examples of anti-Semitism, violent intimidation, and the glorification of terrorism. This must not stand. I've asked the police what powers they need to bring order to our streets.
There's clearly an attempt to vilify protesters here. And if I may, I want to go straight into another question from our online community, and then I'll get your reaction on both, because another member of a social media community here had this question for Roger. Take a look.
Hi, I'm Tanira from London. What would you say to Prime Minister Sunak and other leaders that are quiet or supporting Israel?
So what is your message to Sunak, to other leaders, Joe Biden, for example, who insist on standing by Israel? What is your message today?
Well, to Rishi Sunak, I wouldn't waste my breath saying anything to that cretin. You know, maybe he and his billionaire wife should retire somewhere, but hopefully not to the Holy Land, because there are enough cretins in the Holy Land already destroying the place. But don't get me started on Rishi Sunak. That young woman, it was a sensible question. There's nothing that they can do. Tanira, you have been in the street. You were one of the 500,000 the week after October the 7th, in the streets of London, demonstrating on behalf of the Palestinian people. You are one of the 500,000 or so people who would not have the wool pulled over their eyes. You stood up to be counted, and you will do it again and again and again and again. And we have to keep going back to the streets. We, the people, are many, and they, the Rishi Sunaks, the awful, awful people who are destroying our beautiful planet for profit. Let's call a spade a spade. That's what they're doing. These are the descendants of the settler colonialists from the United Kingdom, and we owe a huge debt to the people of the world, because we went out there in the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries and effed the whole thing up. So we have an absolute responsibility to stand up for human rights, equal human rights under the law for all our brothers and sisters everywhere. And I know you're doing it. I've seen you, and my heart beats stronger every time I see one of those glorious demonstrations, whether it's in the streets of London or whether it's in the Yemen, or whether it's in South Africa or whether it's in Chicago. And we will win this fight, because we are many and they are few. We are the people, and the people do not want this genocide. It's only our crazed lunatic leaders who want it. They believe in unipolar hegemonic behavior. They do not believe in love. Well, I do, and so do you. We believe in love, and we will win this fight. So
Roger, with politicians pushing these narratives and a lot of biased media coverage, we have a question now on the role the entertainment industry could play. Let's have a look.
Hi, my name is Sandrine. I'm from France, and I would like to ask you, what do you think of critics saying that artists should not have opinion on politics? Thank you.
So artists should not have an opinion on politics. You obviously are the exception to that rule, if there is one. What do you say to that?
Why shouldn't artists have political opinions?
And what do you think of the types?
It's like saying a coal miner shouldn't have an opinion, or a doctor.
What do you think of the
nurse,
artists that are not expressing their opinion right now? What do you say to other artists who have remained quiet during this time?
Well, most have remained quiet, but some haven't. Anybody who knows Bono should go and pick him up by his ankles and shake him until he stops being a general shit. You know, we have to start speaking to these people and saying, your opinion is so disgusting and degrading when you stand up for the Zionist entity. What he did in the Sphere in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, singing about the Stars of David, was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life. So, and I've started to text about it occasionally. I try not to get personal about these things, but I've spent so many years writing fruitless letters to, not all, you know, not all. A number of people have answered my letters politely and whatever. And there are a group of us, and I'm not going to start naming all the names now, in the music industry who are standing up for human rights. But more and more people are discovering that the platform is indisputable. And the question is very direct. Do you believe in supporting human rights or not? You can't have it both ways. And that's true of a bass player just as it's true of any worker in any industry. So to single out musicians and to suggest that they shouldn't stand up for their... It's like saying you have no right to love, because this movement is based on our love for one another and our love for the planet that we all call home, because Macron and Sunak and Biden and Blinken and Netanyahu and all the others are destroying our home.
We have
the home that we all live on.
You've had an extraordinary career. It's over 60 years on stages across the world. We have another question from a fan and a fellow musician in France.
Hi Roger, I'm Nicholas from Paris. I have two questions for you about your work with Pink Floyd. At the time, about the composition and the production, did you think about satisfying the musical industry or not? And did you know you were writing a page of history?
So did you care about the music industry when you were actually coming up with your lyrics, with your compositions? And did you know what a big page of musical history you would be writing?
Well, the first part of the question is, yeah, obviously I knew that the industry were going to be interested. There's a song I wrote on the album Wish You Were Here called Have a Cigar, which I wrote in 1974, something like that. Come in here, dear boy, have a cigar. And that was taken from being in the studio with a bunch of executives from CBS coming in, and they thought one of us was called Pink. So it's a sort of true story, but it shows how little grasp they had of what I was writing about. Did I know it was going to become of any historic value? No, of course not. Is it? Yes, it is. That's why I've just remade The Dark Side of the Moon, which is about trying to bring home the message to people that, as far as we know, we only get one chance at life. And there's far more joy to be had in expressing our love for one another and our love for the Mother Earth than there is for expressing our hatred for one another and destroying planet Earth. So that's all that. When I wrote Dark Side of the Moon, I wasn't quite as clear as I am now about what it was about. That is what it's about. And that is the question that is facing us all every minute of every day right now. And all of us, our hearts are in Rafah with our brothers and sisters in Gaza who are being slaughtered by the Zionist entity whose time is over.
You said that this would be your first final tour. I wanted to ask you about this. Do you think about the end? And do you think about your legacy? Would you want to be remembered by your music or your activism or doing the right thing?
Doing the right thing. You know, I think about this every day because all of those of us who care for our brothers and sisters and who have love in our hearts, we spend every day wondering how to get through the next moment in face of this calumny. They are murdering an entire people. The Israelis are murdering every man, woman, and child in Palestine. Nothing else matters at the moment. Once we can stop them doing that, and we can only do that by persuading Biden to say no. He could say no tomorrow. All they have to do is stop sending them money, and it's over. Over. All those children can live. They can start feeding their children again. We can send in medicines, and we could start to redevelop Gaza. But they are living, unfortunately, next to an entity that has been so thoroughly brainwashed in its callous inhumanity that they are going to be very, very difficult to stop. But certainly we have to turn off the tap. So Macron, Sunak, all you Europeans, all that idiot woman who keeps shooting her mouth off, Van Laden or whatever her name is, in the European Union. No, listen to the people. The people are right and you are wrong. It's really, really simple. Read, go and read, all of you morons who seem to think there's something okay about this. You know, the world cannot be ruled. That's something else that I've learned and that I say as often. The world has to be loved and respected and above all, shared. We have an absolute responsibility to share the world with all our brothers and sisters. This is a lesson for the Americans mainly. You cannot steal the whole thing. You cannot eat the whole cake. You have to share it with the rest of the world.
I guess this is as close as I'm going to get to you talking about your own mortality and your own end of your career, but I appreciate nonetheless. This is occupying your mind, obviously. Thank you so much, Roger, for joining us here on the stream today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me and giving this bit of a voice to my brothers and sisters in Palestine. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Don't forget to keep in touch online. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream and send us your comments and suggestions. Take care, and I'll see you next time.